everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Coach and Benway podcast. I am the co-host, Dr. Benway, accredited Harvard Medical School, clearly. So there, and by my doctorly sight and my doctorly know-how, I can tell that a new meme is sweeping the world, the internet, by storm. It is the NPC meme, and I know you all want us to talk about it in some capacity. Coach, talk about it in some capacity.
I think it's ridiculous. It's funny. Okay, and look, this is an incredibly effective meme. And what is an effective meme? An effective meme is a meme that both captures the imagination and is quite perfect in capturing the inner contradictions of the target of the meme's ire, if you will. The previous meme that really hit the mark, that was this effective, was the simple sign, "It's okay to be white." Now, why was that so perfect? Because it captured people's imagination by the notion that there is this notion of being anti-white. Those who are in favor or say nothing or are in favor of the meme are quote unquote racists. And those who oppose the meme, "It's okay to be white," are basically saying it's not okay to be white, therefore they're racist. Okay? And so it's kind of perfect. Now, NPC meme follows a similar logic in the sense that you have the NPC meme of the non-player character meme, that is a person who has no inner monologue, who's just an empty husk, who simply repeats catchphrases, who's just an automaton, right? If you agree with this, then you're saying that there is a large swath of the left wing who are NPCs. If you get angry about it, you're essentially reacting just as an NPC would. You are giving an automatic response, negative response in this case, but an automatic response nevertheless, to the meme, especially when you start calling it things like dehumanizing. If you call it dehumanizing or fascist, as some people have called it, or whatnot, you're basically falling for the meme. And that's what makes it an effective meme. It captures the imagination and it ensures to reveal the inner contradictions of the target of the meme. And, the lefts fell for it. They got to a point where they started banning people who were using the avatar of the NPC. It's goddamn funny, if you ask me.
It was, according to the insider logic, apparently the NPC accounts were banned for quote unquote spreading misinformation about the election, whatever that means.
Yeah, because I can fill you in parenthetically. One of the NPC accounts, a bunch of people set up these NPC accounts self-consciously, okay? So they're not like the main accounts of people. They were just like for lulz, right? And many of them said, don't forget to vote on November 7th, and actual voting day is November 6th. And that's why. That was the rationale. But it seemed absurd. It seemed like, Twitter can't take a joke. That's what it looked like to me. What did it look like to you?
It looks like that for certain. But I think the question is, why does it hit home so well? And to me, the bit of the NPC concept that to me resonates is the idea that when you really think about an NPC, it's an entity in some sort of game that's running on a limited script. It's like there's just basic functionality to perform what is needed for the game engine or the story, right? And so that what you're kind of left with is that if you are called an NPC, what it represents is there's limited, not just thinking, but there's limited operations, right, governing your kind of mind and body there. And so when they say it's dehumanizing, what they're getting around of saying, I think on the left, and why it resonates so well against them, a lot of leftists still consider themselves the hyper-intelligent group in the society. We're the woke members. We're the ones who went to these great schools and we live in the better parts of the world. Get yourself educated is their favorite kind of response a lot of times. And so when you turn around and said, well, actually everything you kind of spout is very predictable. It's not much is there to it. And we got your number. And it's basically like walking around with a bunch of robots. It hits them harder because they have conceived of themselves as the smarter cats,
right?
In the crowd, like, oh, you dumb Republicans, dumb Trump supporters, you like the orange man and blah 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 blah. But we can read through it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
What's interesting about the NPC thing is if you really kind of want to push that front, My reading is like, frankly, a lot more people can be classified with that label, regardless of political side and regardless of whether they support the president or not. I think the question of, people operating on limited script and just doing their sloganeering is something you could really apply to, frankly, a lot of people.
Oh yeah,
The more you think about it. I particularly like that it's effective against the left for the reasons I said. They've convinced themselves they're the sharper crayons in the box.
right.
So the more they get pissed off by it, the happier I am to use it. And I think that's the mechanism you always have to gauge on these things. And, because it will resonate, right? Because everybody's been through that kind of event at some point in their life, whether it's through your family, through people at school, where you'll say something blasé, and in a very predictable fashion, the kind of woke police or the SJW police, whomever you can think of, will go through the same things, trying to insult you, make you feel horrible about yourself, make it seem like you're a disgusting human being. But it's very predictable. You know how they're going to operate. And so to call it essentially, if they're acting like robots, reminds you that, no, you don't feel ashamed all the time. And it works. I like it.
Yeah, I think that, look, let's call a spade a spade. There are a lot of people on the right who are NPCs or act like NPCs. There's no question. There are a lot of people everywhere of all political persuasions, including those people who are apolitical and what have you, who act like NPCs. Now, the issue I think becomes is that where's the dividing line between an NPC and a player character? My thinking is that we were talking about this right before we started recording, of course, which was that, you see, you and I both regurgitate and parrot a lot of ideas that we've heard before because they were better articulated than what we could do, and they captured what we thought in a very precise way. It's a reason that a lot of times, you'll like wind up like, say, parroting Shakespeare in your common conversation, and say something offhand like, all the world's a stage or something like that, or the house divided, or whatever expression from Shakespeare you can think of, because he said it better. And so there's no, in that case, you could say, well, you're being an NPC, but where's the dividing line? I mean, I'm asking you, what do you think is the dividing line? What indicates to you that, no, this is not a faulty Turing machine, this is a successful Turing machine, or a successful, not Turing machine, what you call it, the experiment where the Turing test, right?
Yeah, the Turing test.
Yeah. Where do you draw the line? What's the dividing line between the NPC and the PC?
I think it's the degree to which they have, and I think this is a good question, by the way. I think it's the ability to where you can observe problem solving, right? Mm-hmm. So I think one of my favorite riffs on the NPC meme is when they're going through their standard script of saying, like racist or not, or white people are this, that, or the other, and someone challenges them on them, and you can see the face of the NPC is trying to compute but can't.
Right.
So it has an exclamation point on it, and then the kind of angry eyebrows appear, and then calls you a racist.
Right.
That's the the not computing and not problem solving aspect of it, where doesn't fit my normal construct of what to do, ergo racist.
Right.
I think when someone is quoting some other people's thoughts or bringing in arguments from elsewhere, if you can see that they're bringing arguments to bear, they're entertaining a thought that is complicated through what they may have thought initially, or they're working through potential challenges, or even if they do something as trivial as a thought experiment, that to me is a demonstration of complications in the thinking you're trying to work out, like, well, this, that, or the other, and you kind of go through it. I think more often than not, and this is a judgment call on my part, I will say that I have seen a little bit more diversity on right-wing minded people in terms of the thinking, because I think there are much more disparate tendencies in our cloud, or our kind of group of people right now, because they're working it out. I do think there are groups within our crowd who I can tell they're not working shit out.
Yeah.
So I think Conservatism Inc., a la, what's his face, Ben Shapiro, he's basically like not thinking either. He has his
NPC.
He has his axiomatic positions, and he will work to ensure that they're articulated.
Yeah.
And nothing more. I think there are certain crowds in our group where if you suggest that anything is an ultimate, there is a problem in the world that somehow, some way, did not originate from the Jews, they'll freak out as well. It's just one of those group of people. You know who they are. There are not many of them, but they're loud. And there's you go through your list. I think it's I think there's a lot of folks who just find some comfort in a line of thinking and like it and don't want to really rock the boat a little bit, so they just keep going with it. But I will say, at least for a lot of the people I encounter in our neck of the woods, I think, like I said before, intermediate work product is a beautiful thing, and I think a lot of people are working on the intermediate work product, and intermediate work product, frankly, is the manifestation of a thinking human as opposed to a automaton.
Yeah, because, like, for instance, my thinking on Trump is complicated because I think that the guy is a bit of a used car salesman and full of shit, and yet I think that also he's very effective a lot of times and gets things done that I personally would want to have happen. Like, for instance, just to give a trivial example, in that grab bag, the Kavanaugh nomination, he stuck with the guy. He knew, as a good used car salesman knows, he knew how far to push the issue, and he realized, I can win this issue, and he won it. And good on him, and good for us, our political thinking, right? Because he got a very conservative judge on the court. He got a 5-4 conservative majority. And, looking at the way Ruth Bader Ginsburg is doing, and likely get a 6-3 majority pretty soon, because the midterms, they're going to be a fucking red wave. Forget about the blue wave. Bullshit blue wave, right? But insofar as Trump is concerned, he's been effective. And so therefore, okay, great. But there are a lot of people on our side who are of the opinion that Trump can do no wrong. No matter what he does, he can do no wrong. And that's stupid. That's stupid. That's NPC thinking. And for instance, like Ann Coulter is somebody who's not like this, because she was very pro-Trump, but she understands that the whole notion of a politician is that she has to represent your interests. So she's in favor of him when he's doing the things that she likes, and she just prods him when he doesn't, like the wall. She famously is going on and on about the wall, but be that as it may. She's not an NPC. But there are a lot of people like Sean Hannity, for instance, that I would label an NPC. I mean, he is so fucking predictable as to his political allegiance and how he's going to handle somebody. If Donald Trump is interviewed by Sean Hannity, Donald Trump doesn't have to worry, because Sean Hannity is an NPC. He's going to go through the algorithm that he's been programmed with and spew out the right questions. Whereas with Ann Coulter, she's not. She's not an NPC. She doesn't have one single algorithm to boot out of. She's going to do and ask whatever the hell she wants to, and that's why Ann Coulter will never interview Donald Trump, because he'll never allow it.
Well, it's the same thing with the Never Trump crowd as well. Think of your Bill Kristol.
Oh, yeah.
We know exactly what he's going to say at any given point in time in a very kind of predictable way. And despite, Trump could, give him the exact war with Syria he wants, and Bill Kristol can turn around and say, well, he didn't, conduct it neoconservatively enough, kind of thing. And there's a kind of ridiculousness to that.
Yeah.
And it also kind of highlights why the people we tend to be rather interesting, is that, for example, your Tucker Carlsons as well. Tucker and Laura Ingraham as well. They stuck to their guns against the president when he started doing it, even though it was ultimately trivial, his annual April bombing of Syria. Now it seems maybe next year we'll get our third. But very minor bombing, but needless to say, they were done, and they wouldn't budge, on that. I mean, and what's interesting about that one is, even though they're still maintaining their core positions, they still come across as fully rounded human beings, because they are not necessarily just being a blind cheerleader, of which I think the ultimate example, I was surprised you didn't bring him up, is what's that guy, Bill Mitchell, that guy from Your Voice Radio, the ultimate boomer Trump supporter who thinks that just you watch the Mueller probe as a secret 50-dimensional Trump chess move to secretly get all the Democrats into prison.
Yeah.
That's my favorite one of all.
I
you'll exactly see it.
I'm not familiar with Bill Mitchell, to tell you the truth, but yeah, those guys who are just like, they drank the Kool-Aid. Yeah, it's basically, NPC is another way of saying, they drank the Kool-Aid. But here's something interesting. in like media figures, for example, like Bill Kristol, like Ben Shapiro, for example, those guys have to be predictable, just like Chelsea Handler or Samantha Bee or Rachel Maddow on the other side. You have to be like, respect the brand. You have to deliver what the brand expects. Doesn't that make you an NPC? Doesn't that, the fact that you're not brand loyal, but rather brand on point for the brand, doesn't that make you NPC? I mean, you see the consideration that I'm aiming. I mean, the point I'm trying to make here, that these public figures, these pundits, they have to espouse a certain predictable point of view so that they get the jobs to be on these channels and get their, $500, $1,000 per appearance or whatever it is that they get paid. Isn't it for them, isn't it necessary for them to essentially behave like NPCs?
Well, then and that's a situation where there's ultimately two entities at play. There's the product, and then there's the person selling the product. I ultimately don't know about the person selling the product, but I do know that the product is consistent in the same way that every Ben Shapiro tweet or Ben Shapiro article is like that bottle of Pepsi or that bottle of Coke. It's going to be consistent every time you open it up.
Yeah.
And that, that's a product. It's essentially non-human in and of itself. It's just something you can open up, read, and go, ah.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about let's do a little navel gazing here. On the Coach and Benway podcast, what are we supposed to be doing? I mean, we're basically pundits on a much smaller scale, of course, but are we trying to give a consistent ideology, or are we just investigating the world from slightly different perspectives?
I don't know that I'm even consistent within an episode, to be perfectly honest with you. The more I think, there have been a couple times I'm like, oh, I think I may have changed my mind during the whole making of the episode.
Oh, like on network and broadcast news? Yeah, good.
Well, no, that just reminded me that I am doing charity work and sharing the stage with you.
Good to know,
exactly. But I think for us, it's hard because I don't think I necessarily have a message for the audience, so I don't feel like I'm continuously saying, do this, do that.
Yeah.
I think I have some consistent themes that we are trying to articulate, needly the coming of the civil strife and civil war being one very big one recently. But ultimately, I don't know. I think as we talked about this podcast during the inception and going through it, I think it really came out of a product of, well, these conversations are frankly us working through a lot of thoughts. Let's just put it out there and see what other people kind of respond to it, and give like almost submitting our thinking to an academic board of review, and they're giving us notes, as it were. And I think that means that this whole podcast is a continual series of intermediate work products. I can't guarantee at any given point in time that I'll be 100% consistent from episode 1 through episode 500.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Probably because new events keep emerging, new challenges to what we are thinking come up. We'll certainly trying to be entertaining in the process, but hopefully you could you just see kind of, I mean this in the best kind of way, a couple of bumbling guys trying to figure shit out.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, that's basically how I view it, because a lot of times there are issues that I'm not too certain about. And so I like articulate a particular position just to try it out, just to see how it floats out in the air. Man, if it's a balloon that pops, well, it'll pop, big deal. It's just an idea. But
I think the other example of why we wouldn't be an NPC, if you want to take this
all the way,
that it dies, dies on our operating table. I don't think anybody who's truly an NPC would ever ask themselves if they are. And that was going to lead to another question I had. I mean, because we're doing a thought experiment. Good point. Saying like, hey, are we
NPCs? Yeah.
Just as robotic? Sometimes I do think some of my thoughts are kind of very much received, and I'd like to put more effort into that. But I was thinking to myself, hey, if someone is freaking out about the NPC label because they think it dehumanizes them, is that a manifestation of certain people saying, maybe I am just not really thinking?
Yeah, yes, it is.
What I mean?
Yeah. Oh, no question. If you're freaking out about the NPC meme, then you're secretly concerned that you are one. That's the whole point of it. That's why you'd be outraged over it. Okay. Yeah, definitely. I mean, think how ridiculous it is to say that, oh, the NPC dehumanizes people. That's absurd, right? That really is absurd. And so, what are you really saying when you say such an idiotic position? That you're actually afraid that you are one, because it must have like struck a nerve in you and realizing, holy shit, yeah, I just cycle through algorithms and say this or that or the other depending on the situation, and I am an NPC. And therefore, what do? You panic, and in your panic, you reach for the first cudgel you can find, which is, oh, it's dehumanizing. And dehumanizing who? Who is being dehumanized? By definition, NPCs are not human. They're non-player characters. Okay, they lack inner voice. They lack inner consciousness. Anybody who's outraged by the meme is afraid that they are the meme, and they are, they are lashing out. And I think also it's a weird form of projection that the NPCs dehumanize others. You know what I mean?
Yes, I think this is the other thought experiment I had, because one of the little videos, I reposted it on Twitter. Somebody had took a clip of an interview with Aldous Huxley back when Mike Wallace was just a young pup of 40 some odd years old.
But he was back when he was a middle-aged pup.
He looked like he was 40 some odd fucking years old in the 50s when he had this interview. But needless to say, it was Aldous Huxley talking about the power that you get for controlling people through mass communication. And it cut with footage of people, putting the NPC face under the talking Rachel Maddow, the late night talk show hosts, the CNN crowd and whatnot. And I thought, well, that's very compelling, because it combines the meme with some actual thinking behind it. But more importantly, it raises the thought, why else would it hurt for a left-winger? Or maybe not a serious left-winger, but, a left-winger who watches all those shows, regurgitates the thought. Well, not only are they not thinking, but it also a recognition that they are the recipient of mass media control and communication. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
We had talked before about, hey, with the guys like Ben Shapiro, they're bringing out Coke every day. It's the same bottle of Coke, and it's refreshing. You go, for the people who like it. Mm-hmm. Well, think about it. I think it's probably in many ways the same with your late night talk show hosts and whatnot. I mean, I'm sure some of them believe part of what they're doing, but at the same time, I know they're doing it for bread and circuses, and it's almost like they probably don't come with the customers as much as they think. So think about being a left-wing person. Someone calls you an NPC. Not only is it a fear in your mind that you're just repeating everything that everybody tells you, you don't really think about it, but it's almost like the people who you look up to as heroes almost kind of pulled one over on you.
Yeah.
They had this whole exercise for essentially making money / basically keeping you predictable and somewhat docile, for at least with regard to them. And you're the chump at the end of the day, and nobody wants to be a chump. And I think that's why it's twofold. One, I'm not thinking, but also someone out, pulled a fast one on me. And the double whammy on that really has to hurt. I can't believe it doesn't.
Yeah, and I think that, I look at the NPC, and from my point of view, I would never consider myself an NPC in the sense that I just regurgitate, just cycle through an algorithm to get to the correct response. I try to at least think through everything that comes my way. Of course, inevitably, there are certain things that are automatic, like, I don't know, like, for instance, I opened the door for a woman this morning when I came into the office, right, and she said, thank you, and I said, you're welcome, but, of course, I didn't even think about it. It was just, the natural, algorithm that you have built in insofar as your behavior is concerned. There are lots of my behaviors that are built in this way that I'll do automatically, without even thinking. It's perfectly reasonable. But the thing is, insofar as what I'm consuming, insofar as culture and media is concerned, what I'm consuming or experiencing insofar as ideas are concerned, I chew on them. And there are some things that I can, say, okay, I'm okay with this, and other things I'm like, okay, I'm not down with this. Or other times I'm like, okay, I've heard this shit before, countless times. I mean, like, for instance, that's why with so many YouTubers, I don't pay attention to them anymore, because I know what they're going to say. I was watching a YouTuber yesterday, as a matter of fact, and he was saying, the same old stuff that he's said countless times before, or others of his ilk have said before. I'm not going to name names because there's no reason to shit on this guy. He's a hardworking guy and produces his content, and good on him. But it's the same shit. So why am I going to listen to it? So I just flipped it off because it was just not. It wasn't. It was. I didn't want to feel that I was just going through the same thing. But there are people who will watch that guy's content all the way through, and it's
right. Yeah, and that's my worry. To be just fully self-critical where possible, is that I know there reaches a point where I will immediately just shut off what people are saying just based on received kind of pre-assumptions about what they are or what they have said in the past. So like, if so-and-so pulls out another video and they say something I disagree with, I'll think, okay, they're this type of person, this kind of crowd. I'm done. I don't need to think about it, as a way of just a natural tendency of saying there's only so many hours in the day. There's only so many things I can focus on. I got to shut some things out.
Yeah.
The worry you have at that point is, well, what if they said something compelling that I should have thought about? And my reaction to it is basically an almost like a algorithmic mechanism just to ignore it. And then that begs the question of to what degree you're not fully acting like a human. You're not particularly mindful of everything, right?
Well, you can't be mindful of everything 24/7. You're just right. Your brain just does not have the capacity. Okay, you have to go through automatic phases of just of being an automaton, at least during some phases. That's why, for instance, you always wonder whether you locked the door or turned off the gas when you're a mile or two from home, because it's an automatic thing and you're not thinking it. You're not almost conscious. I would guess that you're not really conscious. It's why when you're driving your car right, on the highway, you can listen to music or listen to a podcast or a audiobook or whatever and not crash because you're just driving automatically, like an automaton. Are you an automaton? No. At that time, are you behaving like an automaton? Yeah, because you're driving automatically while you pay attention to presumably this podcast or whatever else that you're listening to or even doing at the time, because there are lots of things that you can be doing as you are driving. You can be thinking about things that you have that are going on in your life, your everything from the mundane to the transcendental while you're driving. And the fact that you're driving, it's just automatic, it's just thoughtless. I drove around the North American continent back in the early 2000s. I drove 20,000 miles. And all of that driving, I was just thinking about other things or experiencing the environment around me, because I drove through some beautiful places like Banff National Park up in Canada and the Brooks Range up in Alaska. It's really beautiful, beautiful country, right? And so I wasn't really paying attention to the driving. I wasn't mindful, quote unquote, of the driving. But I think that most of life is like that you're just going through it without much thought. Even very creative things, you're often going through them without much thought. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. There are certain things that they become a sense memory exercise. I agree that, but I think in many instances of what we're talking about here, it's usually the thing that is clearly of the forefront of your conscious moment, right? So I think when we see people protesting in the streets and they're going, "There's shame on you, shame on you." It's not like, oh, they're in the middle of painting a picture and they're not thinking about doing the brush strokes on the hair because they've just done it a million times. This is, the primary focus of their conscious mind at a moment, and it's still somewhat automated. To me, what's great about there's a lot of things that are enjoyable about this meme, mostly that it's working. But the other thing I like about it is that it just, like all the great memes or all the great things that capture the imagination, they draw within them things that you can kind of reinforce from history, from culture, what have you. I had mentioned that Aldous Huxley discussion of the mass media as a means of control, which absolutely sinks to it. The other element that sinks to it quite well is your works of Philip K. Dick, and obviously Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. The most obviously famous one, the movie, obviously famously Blade Runner. But the interesting thing in that book, which you get a little bit of in the movie, but not as much as if you had read the book, was Philip K. Dick's whole point about what is and isn't human is the degree to which the human is conscious of their actions and decisions versus doing what they're told and doing as kind of expected in a mechanical kind of way. So the question, hey, Deckard, are you a replicant? What Dick is saying, Dick isn't trying to do what Ridley Scott has, like, oh, it's like a cool mystery. He may be a superhuman machine. No, Dick's point was a little bit more scary in the sense that if you go around just following the instructions of killing whatever creature is in front of you because you're told that, oh, this is a replicant, go get rid of it, you are effectively a machine at that point because you have seceded to others the critical faculties for moral judgment, for thinking, rational thought. Go down the list of what you want. To me, this is a Philip K. Dick moment, right? These people have, be they leftists or even frankly in our site, you reach a point where you are operating in a way that is, as I said, you've succeeded the most important aspects of your existence to other people. And oftentimes it can get as creepy as, the Blade, well, it's not in the book, but, the Blade Runner characters, the guys who go around killing folks because they're told to, and they're replicants.
Yeah.
Well, they're going around and saying, oh, they're Nazis, going to bash their heads in. Effectively, that concept is there.
Yeah, I love that Nazi thing. When it doesn't compute, they're a Nazi. That's like the default message, or the error message, the 404 or 502 or whatever. The bad gateway, he's a Nazi.
The 1488 error, you might say.
Yeah. But look, this comes, of course, to the key issue that you can't have, a tribe can't be, all chiefs, no Indians, You cannot have a society where everybody is morally questioning every fucking thing that they do every second of the day. You have to have a society, a functioning society, where most of the people are acting in predictable ways. It's just necessary. They have to be acting in predictable ways and ways that can be harnessed in productive ways, in ways that are beneficial to the wider society. You can't have guys like you and me talking and thinking and going on and on and on about stuff without just going through the automated processes that are necessary to keep the society functioning. You know what I mean? I mean, yeah, sure, we need somebody to talk to, but we need someone to sweep the floors too, like the song says.
Well, regardless of, like you said, whether it's a question of sweeping the floors or not, it's, regardless of your hierarchical position, it's not like 24/7, I'm asking like, oh, I'm writing with a ballpoint pen. Is this a moral and ethically just exercise to be using this? You know what I mean? Because you'd go crazy.
Yeah.
Right. But there has to be at least some sort of sign that you had like an audit, every so often you said, pause and reflect on the moment. Does this make sense? Okay. Yeah. And then you proceed.
Wait. Are you turning Scientologist on me, man?
Well, there's at the very. I use the term in a very loose. I don't have my tin coffee can tied to a slight electric battery that will fluctuate. It was 5. It went to 5.5.
Yeah, you got 5.5.
You've got thetans in you.
Yeah, you have to pay $5,000 for the next level, or else those thetans are gonna eat away at your soul.
Yeah, charge you 20 grand to tell you that some guy took people in DC-8 planes and threw them in volcanoes many millennia ago. It's very clear.
Yeah,
very clear. Well, very clear what happened. I mean, L. Ron Hubbard is discovering higher planes of existence as we speak at this moment.
Oh God,
we really went off on a tangent on this one.
Yeah,
but needless to say, I think people are looking for a sign that at some point, if not obviously not every minute, but at some regular point, you question like, am what I'm doing make sense? Is this? Am I really doing what I should be doing? Okay, yes, I am. Then let's go forward. You know what I mean? I think a lot of folks probably don't pause and consider that.
Well, I'm guessing most people don't. Most people don't pause and consider if they're doing the right thing, if they're behaving in moral ways or behaving in even conscious ways. I think most people just, muddle through. And most people need guidance. Most people are not able to handle complete freedom. They just can't. They can't handle it. They don't know what to do. It's sort of like giving a Ferrari to a teenager. He's going to crash it inevitably because he doesn't have any sense. And most people, like it or not, don't have much sense. Most people were born NPCs. Perhaps they have like a consciousness and perhaps a rich consciousness, but it seems to me that most people, this is a thought that I'm floating out there, seeing if it floats or not. Most people do not have the capacity to enjoy the freedom that they have. That they just do not have, not even the consciousness necessary to enjoy the freedom that they have, but the self-discipline and the ability to not go off the tracks, not go off the rails. I mean, you see this with people who win the lottery all the time. Most of them end up, by a ditch in the road, metaphorically speaking, sometimes literally too. They have all of this freedom. They have, because that's what money does. It gives you freedom. They have all of this freedom all of a sudden, and they make horrible decisions. They make horrible decisions with this money. And they wind up crashing their lives. We see this all the time. It's a cliche. So wouldn't it be safe to say that?
I don't think of it as much a question on whether you can handle freedom or not. I think there's just an innate tendency in the human species to kind of go with crowds. Remember that, I forgot the name of this test, but it was a rather notable sociological experiment where, you would, if you take a test subject, right? And you go into a room, it's just the test subject and the auditor, right? And you gave 3 lines, right? You have 1 long line on the chalkboard and 2 short lines of equal length, right? And you tell them which is the longest line. They'll always pick the one because it's just obvious. It's not a question of perception or whatnot. But you take that subject and you put 2 other subjects with them, but they're plants, and they say that the shorter line is the longest line and they go first, you can get a lot of subjects to go against their obvious thinking and go with the crowd, because there's this innate tendency, I don't know if it's a fear or if it's a just desire to be consistent, to fit in, what have you, but it's real, that it's demonstrable. There's various variations on that test. I think that's probably a little bit of it, right? I think that's certainly how you can say that this NPC meme works in a particularly strong way against the liberal crowd, because the liberal crowd, frankly, is the dominant narrative.
Yeah.
Right. Our crowd right now is more of an insurgency. There's a little bit of social risk to do it, particularly if you live in an urban area.
There's a huge social risk. Yeah.
Huge social risk, and also it gets more acute the certain classes or certain areas you're in. So if you're upper middle class, you go to an Ivy League school, and you may have centrist or even conservative tendencies, you may very well shut the fuck up about them, and you may very well go with the crowd for a variety of reasons: to get a girl, to get a boyfriend, to make sure you have friends who will eat lunch with you. Pick your poison. All of those social pressures are there, and they keep going. And not to mention, all of these received thoughts of diversity is our strength. Anybody should be able to move and do whatever they want. Don't interrupt my freedom of choice. Hey, if it doesn't hurt anybody else, it's important. This has been regurgitated for a long time from both ends of the quote unquote political spectrum. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure to just kind of keep it going. And even if you want to challenge it, like, for example, my favorite iteration on this, even for people who are trying to be in defense of Trump's positions, they always do the same thing, which annoys the hell out of me. It's like, look, I think the guy's an idiot, but it's like, why do you have to preface that? What does it matter? You're trying to say that the point is valid. You're just doing that so you can get street cred, or you're just doing that so people, you subconsciously think, well, I don't want them thinking I just really like him. I want them to know that I really am with them. I fundamentally don't like him, but in this instance, I think he has a point. So don't hurt me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Pay attention as you hear people talk. You will hear this preface a lot. And I think it's a manifestation of that same tendency to be afraid of disassociating yourself with the crowd too much.
Yeah, I would. I think I would agree. Yeah, often as not we do say that, but I think that, well, but look, it goes back to evolution. We're a social animal, and we need others to survive. No man is an island unto his own, by himself, or whatever the line is, and you need other people to survive in this society. You need to fit into the society. So yeah, so a lot of times we'll trim our sails as to our thinking and just go with the flow in order to survive. It's built into us. Go ahead.
And for a lot of people, right? I think that's right. But for a lot of people, when you think about these mass demonstrations and this participation against Trump or whatever, right? In many instances, for a lot of these people, this is really their only major social participation, right? It's not like like I said, they're going to the local Kiwanis club or they're taking their kids to the, for their driving lessons at school, or they're going to the local hockey game. I'm just making shit up. Normal things that you would engage with your fellow citizens on. People don't do that a lot now. So oftentimes this is the mechanism by which that gets done. And so they won't rock the boat too much because, this is the only place I can fit in and talk to people and have a social experience. I think that must be part of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because think of it the other way. If you have a full life where you're, like I said, you go to the, the Friday night football game in high school, you do your the various things with your kids, you're part of the, God help us all, PTA or whatever little social clubs you're doing or social participation in your local community, odds are you're probably not going to give that much of a shit about, say, oh, I need to go to this mass pussy hat rally and get that. It's like, it's just an interference. It's probably a little bit too simplistic relative to the complexities of life in society. But when this is all the society you've got left, well, don't rock the boat too much.
Yeah, I was thinking of something a bit different. A thought experiment I had the other day. The old Robinson Crusoe story, right? A man, is a sole survivor of shipwreck on an island, and he has to survive on that island, right? Suppose Robinson Crusoe, the 18th century figure, or 17th century figure, I forget what year Defoe wrote the novel. Imagine he were dropped into the middle of New York City. How would he survive? That's an interesting experiment, because you start to realize all the things that you need, intangible things that you need in order to survive. Not just issues like money, but you have to have a certain knowledge of how to use money, how to use the little plastic cards that are so important to your life. And if you don't have those plastic cards, you're in deep shit. You're in real deep shit. There was a time in my life when I only had like a couple of credit cards. I at this point, I think I have 8 different credit cards for different reasons, and they fulfill different functions, but what have you. These credit cards are essential. And if you don't have credit cards, you sort of like don't exist in modern life. You know what I mean? And if you don't know how to get more zeros into the credit card so that you can do more stuff with it, if you don't know how to have a bank account, you cannot survive in this world. It's really weird. I mean, our society has made it such that we need to have a whole grab bag of information in order to make it, in order to just exist. You see what I'm saying? I mean, you see what I'm saying?
It's also above and beyond little trappings like that. It's also, there are a lot of components of your life, be they forms of consumption or other aspects of it, which, depending on where you are and what milieu you're in, have been decided for you.
Yeah.
I remember, let's say a couple of years ago, I remember when people were scoffing at the idea that, oh, I'm in, New York, or I have this type of job. I'm making $100,000 a year, but it's still a struggle. And now people are saying, oh, $100,000 a year, you're struggling. How, you entitled prick. It's like, well, if you read what he's saying, there's a lot of truth to it. For certain jobs, you know you're going to be buying suits and you're going to be buying this kind of clothing. That's a major aspect of your life, how you conduct yourself. Those are very expensive as well. And that's a significant portion of your output in your life. That's by virtue of the group you're in, it's already been decided for you. Well, that's a piece of your thinking that's already gone. It's right then and there. There are other elements to it that you can add up. And yeah, so, you're a lot of what you're kind of doing this big job for, this money, getting all this money for, is to participate for the sake of being able to do it. A lot of it is scary in that regard. You're effectively saying, like Robinson Crusoe, if he had to fit in, he would find that, if he managed to get those kinds of jobs, it would be a mental rewrite.
Yeah.
In significant regard.
Yeah.
He probably wouldn't be prepared for. It was almost, it's not perfect, but it was like that moment in Castaway when Tom Hanks returns after years of fending for himself on the island, and he's like, okay, well, clearly I'm not worried about food right now. He picked up the crab legs.
Yeah, it's like full of food.
Full of all this food that he would struggle to get. And, the whole then question of what you're supposed to do and to survive completely shifts. And because it completely shifts, you then raise the question. It's like, well, who decided it for me? And did I really have a say in it? And if there's so much that I don't have a say in, what's the fucking point about it?
By the way, a quick pit stop. I think that movie was the greatest missed opportunity ever. I thought that the first half, 2/3 of it, where he's on the island, right, and he lands there and he has all this trouble starting a fire and all that early stuff, that was incredibly good. I thought that the time leap 4 years forward until he finds the porta potty and that whole sequence of him trying to get off the island was incredible. But the moment he got rescued, the rest of the movie just collapsed. It had the potential to have all of these incredibly interesting ideas, and I mean, even from the basics, like they didn't have a scene of him getting shaved and seeing himself after all this time, because he didn't have a mirror, did he? I forget if he had a mirror or not. But
he had some means of reflection.
Okay. But like, imagine, him staring at himself in the mirror as he's getting shaved and a haircut after 4 years. I mean, the impact of that would have been incredible. And I don't know what were they thinking. And it was like they did all of this incredible effort because it's remarkable. It's a remarkable picture that they shot half of the movie and then took a year off for Tom Hanks to lose the weight in a way that looked natural, that looked and also frankly healthy in a way that didn't kill the poor guy. And then they came back and finished the movie but that last third of the picture was a complete bust. You know what I mean?
But I think it's a bust because it precisely did this thing. Because think about it. You have 2/3 of a movie of a man trying to figure out in a raw, real kind of way how to survive and the various ingenuity and thinking about it. And what does the film do upon receiving him? Well, much in a non-thinking fashion, like, well, this has become a love story, so he has to resolve his love story.
Jesus Christ.
It's a non-thinking response, right? It's very predictable. Oh, we have to do the traditional movie now.
Yeah. NPC.
And that's exactly. And that was my point about your Robinson Crusoe character. When he would basically be forced to realize he's going to be entering a situation where he doesn't really have much say in the matter, can't do much of anything because it's kind of like a structured order. I'm perhaps getting a little bit too into Rousseauian thinking now, perhaps disturbingly, which is it's the society as opposed to man's wonderful state of nature, which is causing a lot of shit. But maybe. I don't know.
No, I think that ultimately we are creatures of habit, okay? And sometimes those habits lead us to become automatons. We love comfortable habits. To give you a specific example that I live with, I have my studio. And so whenever I'm spending the full day at the studio working on videos or whatever, or just real life stuff that I have to deal with, I'll go out. There's a supermarket right across the street. And it's got this prepared food section. It's really good, right? but I wind up eating the same thing day after day. You know, there's like an infinity of choice at the prepared food section. It's really good. Everything is just yummy, right? But no, I wind up getting the same stuff, and it's why? Why don't I just change? I'm thinking to myself, oh, that's yummy. Oh yeah, I liked it before. I'll have it again, and I sort of like unthinkingly. Say 200 grams, please, of the salad and 200 grams of that other stuff, and I take my standard food. It's gotten to the point where I almost know the price that I'm going to have to pay. It's because it's always a slightly different because you pay by the weight of the prepared food, of course. And so when I get to the cashier, I can almost figure out how much I'm going to pay for the meal because it's the same meal. Because it's just easier to not think it over and like dither and stuff. And because a lot of times I just dash over there because I'm thinking about something and I want to figure it out, and so I just want to get food, get fuel, basically. It's basically stopping at the gas station to fill her up. You know what I mean? And so
there's another real life example that everybody knows in their life, which is independent of grammar school. Let's say you go to a meeting and you're going to be in the same spot regularly. 99.99% of the time, if wherever you started sitting day one, when day two comes around, you're going to sit there.
Yeah.
And when day three comes around, you're going to sit there. There's no assigned seating. There's no obligation to sit there. People always go back to the same thing.
Yeah.
Variations on this happen. I'm the same way with food. I tend to get the same thing regularly where I go. I tend to keep a lot of routines. Now, the theory behind that, of which the quote unquote Albert Einstein arguments, like, I'll wear the same thing so I don't have to spend energy thinking about what to wear. The reality, I don't think I think that's over exaggerated a claim, but in theory, the point of certain routines is to not, waste your time on things that don't matter. And you should then spend your time on things that do matter, figuring out, the uniqueness of your position. But the reality is that most people don't spend the time there. Even the most important things are still routinized.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the problem, that the routinization creeps up into those things that are important. And so you wind up having your entire life being a routine. I think that's the problem. Because it's not a problem of automating rather, certain aspects of your life or certain behaviors or what have you, eating the same food day after day, sitting in the same spot in the meetings day after day. That's not the problem. The problem is that when that kind of thinking goes into the major decisions of your life, when you start thinking to yourself, oh, I'll just do what everybody else is doing because it's just easier. Everybody else is, studying software engineering. Fine, I'll be a software engineer. As opposed to, deciding for yourself and figuring it out. And that's the tragic part, is that so much of education was built on the premise that it was the way for you to figure out who you were and therefore figure out what kind of a life you'd like to lead. And it's decayed into this automated kind of like stamping them out kind of thing.
It was the great line in the Bret Easton Ellis book on American Psycho, and he's, the character of Patrick Bateman, he says, yeah, you may ultimately, if you shake my hand, you feel flesh there and all of these other things, but his existence has been received to the point where he says, I simply am not there. And this is directly out of almost literally directly out of Heidegger's concept of existence. He has two concepts that are important to this. There's Dasein, being there, and there's a concept of das Man, or what one does. And the thing you have to watch about the das Man, or what does one do? It's the same, it's like one should do this. One is obliged to do this. It's a way of life without thinking through it. Dasein, being there, that's his whole existential concept, was you have to somewhat be mindful of the moment and the life that you are living, and it becomes authentic at that point. If you are just das Man, or what one does, what one is expected, you have disassociated yourself from the fundamental being of your existence, and you effectively become, to go back to the meme, the NPC.
Yeah, I was thinking of something else. Isn't it weird that American Psycho turned out to be such an important book?
It was interesting at the time because it was the same shrill feminist hated it. called it a misogynistic book. I'm sure they still hate it, and I still think it's, despite all of the all of the parts of the book that you would think that like, oh, this is just a forgettable bit of
Trashy, yeah.
trash novel, it still works.
Yeah, that's the weird part. That for all of its, yeah, because you have to. I look at it and I say, this is just a money grab. This guy was just trying to make some money, and a lot of money if he could, And yeah, good on him. I don't have a problem with anybody making money, but it was just a money grab insofar as literature is concerned, quote unquote. But the weird thing is that it turned out to be a more important book rather than a lot of the other quote unquote serious novels that came out roughly at the same time. That's just fucking funny.
Well, think about it. Like, its competitor, roughly, it must have been at the time, was Tom Wolfe's book. What was it?
A Man in Full?
No, not A Man in Full. That came later. It was Bonfire of the Vanities.
Right. Well, yeah, no. Bonfire came out in '87, and
all right. So it's roughly the same period of time.
No. American Psycho came out in the late '90s.
No, '89. American Psycho came out '89.
Really?
Yeah, Glamorama, which is the follow-up, came out in the mid '90s. But yeah, American
91,
Psycho was
91. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, more or less a contemporary piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, people thought that Tom Wolfe's book was the proper satire of that '80s, and it has its moments. But Tom Wolfe's, his fiction isn't particularly, my favorite part about him.
No.
But American Psycho, I think, really did capture it, and I feel like it still captures it. The joke, it seems to me, about New York, despite all of its dynamism, is that it still feels in some way very provincial and stuck in amber. It feels in many ways the most provincial city I've ever been in.
New York? Oh yeah. But I would venture. No, Paris is worse. Believe me, I lived in Paris. And Parisians are the most provincial people you'll ever meet. They are so amusing. It sort of like spoiled my whole stay in Paris, because I realized this almost at the start, and about Paris, that they were provincials, that they only see Paris, and not even all of Paris. They just the arrondissement and the rest of the world doesn't exist as far as they're concerned, right? And they are provincial. They are just navel gazers. It is just so amusing. They have no conception rather, of the wider world. It is just screamingly funny. When I realized this, I was at a dinner party, and early in when I was living there, I lived there roughly a year in 2011, 2012, and it was so goddamn funny. It was just screamingly funny. When I realized this, because I thought, they're so sophisticated, they're French and all the rest of it. But no, they're provincials. New York has become like that, okay? That they only see each other. And well, the media that's centered in New York is completely provincial. And well, the NPC meme is hitting on them hard, because I think a lot of them are smart enough to realize that it's fundamentally accurate, that they just repeat certain phrases and certain chants and certain ideas, and
it's fundamental unawareness. Like I said, what was great about the NPC meme is like a limited amount of script to just get what you need. There's that famous New Yorker cover, right, where they just showed the New Yorker's view of life, where it just literally like most of the map is just a few of the streets that are important on the island, and then they have like this big empty space, and then California is off in the distance, their view of America. That's basically the NPC thinking in a nutshell. It's like you have just a sheer limited number of factors. You focus on only doing what is necessarily important, and even then in a very predictable kind of way. And that's why I love calling New Yorkers provincials, because I know it hits them hard, because they think they're like, we're more like a world city. It's
right.
No, you're more like a little fucking tribe on an island, and and many of you fuckers can't even figure out how to leave the island. And which is wonderful, keep you there. My attitude. And if the Parisians are even worse, I can completely believe you on that front. Which is why I always say that you will invariably see a lot more sophistication within middle America, not the least of which is because when you're told that you only have some culture and you're forced to pay attention to the cultures elsewhere, you tend to just be more observant. You can't help but know things outside of yourself.
Yeah.
Which is more healthy than not, which is why it's harder for you to become an NPC.
Yeah, I think that what's funny about this whole thing, and just to tidy up this topic, is the outrage over this. I think that's ultimately the thing that I find is the funniest part, and also in a weird way the saddest part, because the outrage signals knowledge. The outrage signals that that they are aware that they are NPCs,
Right.
or it's a sudden realization, or they've been thinking about it for a while, or they've always known. It doesn't matter, but because you are never outraged by something that is demonstrably false. The truth triggers. I said that in a video. The truth triggers. See, if I say something about you, Benway, for instance, I don't know, that you're like a fat dunderhead. You don't even think about it because you think it's ridiculous, because you know that it's not true, and you know that nobody would think it's true. You only get triggered, you only get outraged by something that is true, or that you are terrified is true. And your enemies are flinging it in your face, or you perceive that your enemies are flinging it in your face. It drives you nuts, because it's your fundamental fear that you are not an independent thinking person. You're just a consumer. You're just a useful idiot. You're just an NPC. Ouch!
Well, it's because you're using all that effort it's not to convince the people who made these accusations that you're not. You're convincing yourself, and you are your own worst critic, because nobody knows you better than you yourself.
Yeah.
Know you.
Yeah.
And all of that effort that they're doing about the dehumanization, all that jazz, trust me, 60% of that effort is them trying to convince themselves that it is not the case.
Yeah. 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 And it's also projection. It's total projection. To claim, it's dehumanizing. No, it's because you use dehumanizing language on your opponents. That's what's going on here. So fuck off, right? Oh, man, it's fucking beautiful. So anyway, on that cheerful note, this has been the Coach and Benway podcast. Hope you've enjoyed the episode, and we will catch you next time.
So please, everybody, like, subscribe, press the bell, all these other things that I'm supposed to say at end of video. Video number, whatever number it is,
94,
in very
unpredictable,
in very unpredictable fashion. I will say all of these things because that is what a free thinking person does. Signing off now, Benway Bot 759.
Take it easy.